Have you ever noticed something in old photographs that shouldn't be there? Clothing from the future in the past, mysterious natural and cosmic phenomena. Here is a selection of images that have captivated researchers for decades. These are officially documented artifacts, preserved in museums and published in books. Are you ready to be amazed? Time Traveler 1941. This black and white photograph, purportedly taken in 1941 during the opening of the South Forks Bridge in Goldbridge, Canada, contains an intriguing element. It depicts a man dressed in seemingly modern clothing, holding a camera that was clearly ahead of its time. Nearby, another man with a camera is pictured, but this one is typical of the time. The man wears wraparound arrowhead glasses, a turtleneck sweater, and a compact camera reminiscent of Japanese models from the 1960s. Some claim this man could be a time traveler. However, others dispute that such sunglasses and clothing actually existed at the time. While such items were common, the style of clothing was not common at the time. However, no one has a convincing explanation for his high-tech camera. Unless this person is a time traveler, they must have a remarkably accurate eye for future fashion trends. Although fashion historians confirm that Ray-Ban Caravan sunglasses similar to those pictured were produced since 1936, their design was considered marginal for the working class. Astronaut Solway Firth, May 23, 1964. On May 23, 1964, Jim Templeton, a firefighter from Carlisle, Cumberland, took 3 photographs of his 5-year-old daughter, Elizabeth, during a day trip to Burrow Marsh. He was shocked when Kodak returned one of the images, which showed a man in a spacesuit in the background. According to Templeton, the only people on the marsh that day were 2 elderly women sitting in a car at the far end of the field. He didn't notice the figure in the background until the photographs were developed. Templeton also claims that Kodak specialists confirmed the authenticity of the image. Electricity in the Air, a terrifying deathbed photo. This sweet and funny photo hides a terrifying story. The 1975 photo features brothers Michael and Sean McQuicken and was taken by their sister Mary. She decided to capture her brothers on top of Morro Rock in Sequoia National Park in California. 2 seconds after the photo was taken, they were struck by lightning. Only Michael, pictured right, survived. A doubly creepy photo of a clown. It's unlikely the photographer could have suspected anything about the subject of his terrifying shot. He knew he was photographing Mr. John Wayne Gacy, a model family man, a talented clown, and an overall wonderful person. John not only entertained children under the name Pogo the Clown, but also ran his own construction business, joined the Democratic Party, became the treasurer of a charity, and was involved in social activities. No one knew that this good-natured, overweight man had already served time for sexually assaulting teenagers until December 11, 1978. 15-year-old Robert Piest, last seen in Gacy's company, disappeared. His mother reported that he had gone to apply for a job with Gacy and never returned. Police obtained a search warrant for Gacy's home. They descended into the clown's basement and discovered the bodies of 29 young men and teenagers. The total number of victims of the clown maniac is 33. A terrifying photo of a woman who lived in captivity for 25 years. Frenchwoman Blanche Monnier spent 25 years confined to her own room, lightless, naked, half-starved, surrounded by her own excrement and the company of rats with whom she shared her bread. This 1901 photo is terrifying enough, but its story is even more terrifying when police, after receiving an anonymous letter, searched Blanche's parents' home. They found her in this state. It turns out that Blanche had been punished by her parents as a very young woman. They locked her in her room to prevent her from marrying a man from a different social class. Blanche Monnier was released at the age of 49, terribly emaciated and mentally damaged. Although her physical health eventually recovered, her mental state never fully recovered. Blanche's former lover, the reason for her imprisonment, died 16 years before her release. Blanche Monnier's mother was imprisoned, where she soon died of heart failure. A horrific photograph whose author committed suicide. This horrific photograph, which has traveled around the world, was taken in 1993 in Sudan during a mass famine. Photographer Kevin Carter, who took this horrific image, won a Pulitzer Prize for it, and the photograph itself, purchased and published by the New York Times, shocked the public. The photo looks as if a vulture is about to attack a dying child, but in fact there's no particularly terrifying story behind it. The photo was taken while the girl's parents were unloading humanitarian aid from a plane and briefly left the child alone while the emaciated toddler tried her best to catch up with them. Then the vulture landed nearby. The photographer approached slowly so as not to frighten the bird and took a series of shots from a distance of about 10 meters, then chased the vulture away. In reality, the bird posed no serious threat to the child. Two photographers from Spain, Luis Arenzana and Luis de Villa, took similarly eerie photos nearby at the same time and reported that there were unusually many vultures around, and the children were so emaciated that the birds flocked to them as soon as they stopped moving, but they did not attack the living. So you take a telephoto lens and photograph the child against the vulture, and even though in reality the distance between them may be 20 meters, in the photo it will appear as if the vulture is about to peck the child. Nevertheless, the press did not leave Kevin Carter alone. Here's what the St. Petersburg Times wrote about him. A man who adjusts his lens just to get the perfect shot of a suffering child is like a predator, just another vulture. 3 months after winning the Pulitzer Prize for this horrific photograph, Kevin Carter committed suicide. The Duchenne-Monde experiments between 1854 and 1856, the French neurologist Guillaume Benjamin Amand Duchenne de Boulogne conducted a series of electrophysiologic experiments to assess how facial muscles form various expressions. For his research, he used inhumane methods. He restrained the unfortunate patients and administered electric shocks to obtain the necessary data. The subjects were shocked with electricity to observe how their facial expressions would change. Vintage Halloween costume. This vintage Halloween costume was discovered on a farm in Camp Dix, New Jersey, USA in 1917. It certainly evokes some primal fear and is definitely more terrifying than a ghost made of sheets. The cell where the Salem witches were held. This makeshift prison cell truly symbolizes the horrors that befell the Salem witch trials. It was in these cells that the accused women spent their last moments before their execution. Between 1692 and 1693, more than 200 people were accused of witchcraft and 19 of those found guilty were sentenced to death. The last portrait of the Lawson family. This photograph looks like an ordinary family portrait, and all would be well were it not for the fact that this picture was taken just a few days before the family's patriarch, Charlie Lawson II from right, murdered all of his relatives, pictured here on Christmas Day 1929. Only 16-year-old Arthur Left managed to escape. George Metesky, the Mad Bomber. Between 1940 and 1956, George Metesky, nicknamed the Mad Bomber, terrorized New York City by planting bombs in public places. He was responsible for more than 30 bombings, injuring 15 people. Metesky didn't just plant bombs. He wrote mocking letters to local newspapers until 1957, when he was arrested and committed to a psychiatric hospital. Gloves made of human skin. The murders of American serial killer Ed Gein in the mid-1950s were so horrific that they inspired horror films like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Psycho. The Plainfield, Wisconsin man robbed graves, murdered innocent women, and fashioned furniture and clothing from their body parts. This was only discovered after his arrest in 1957, when police searched his home and discovered mutilated bodies, skull cups, a lampshade made of a human face, and gloves made of human skin. The final moments of a man who jumped into a tiger's enclosure. In September 2014, visitors to the National Zoo in Delhi, India, watched in horror as a tiger killed a 20-year-old visitor. The unnamed young man, who reportedly suffered from mental illness, leaped over the enclosure's fence and found himself directly in front of the ferocious white tiger. For the next 15 minutes, the animal brutally mauled the man while onlookers tried to drive the tiger away with stones. It was unsuccessful, and until the victim died, screams echoed throughout the zoo. The last photo of a Papua New Guinea explorer. This photo shows Michael Rockefeller, the son of New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller, who later became Vice President of the United States. Michael had everything, but his soul craved adventure, and in the early 1960s, the young man set off on an expedition to Papua New Guinea. But the locals weren't very friendly. The Papuan Asmat people are known cannibals, so after a hilarious ritual, they beheaded and ate the unfortunate Michael Rockefeller. A person's shadow imprinted after the explosion in Hiroshima. On August 6, 1945, the United States dropped the atomic bomb Little Boy on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. After this horrific event, literally nothing remained of many of the 80,000 victims but nuclear shadows. The explosion heated the air 25,000°C, incinerating people and completely discoloring the surrounding surfaces. As a result, silhouettes of the dead remained on the surviving walls and ground the shadows cast by their bodies at the last moment. Keith Sapsford's fall from a plane. On February 22, 1970, 14-year-old Keith Sapsford ran away from his boarding school in Sydney, Australia, and climbed onto the wheel of an airplane, hoping to have fun or fly as far as possible. However, the young man didn't realize that planes climb to altitudes of 9 to 11 kilometers, 36 to 68 miles, and that at such altitudes, oxygen deprivation can cause serious brain damage. But reality proved far more brutal. Keith also didn't realize that the plane wouldn't fly with its landing gear down for the entire flight. As a result, he simply couldn't hold on. His fatal fall was accidentally captured by photographer John Gilpin, who was photographing airplanes that day.